Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'll show you how to implement drag and drop functionality using vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's raining outside, so please excuse the noise. Today's video will be in two parts. So in the first part of the video, I'll show you how to build a basic container which you can drag and drop items onto. And then in the second part of the video, I'll show you how to build a container with a list of items that you can drag and drop around to sort the list. So just to give you an idea of what I'll be taking you through, this is the first part or the first drag and drop that we'll be building up. And what I have here is a container with shapes that I can drag and drop onto. So for example, if I move this circle here and I hover over the container here, the color should change. And then once I let go, it should move the shape there. Same with the square and the triangle. And then the second part of the video, we'll be building out this list here. So we've got a list of items that we can move around to sort the list of shapes that we have here. So if I move square and hover over circle, it should bring the square above that. I can also bring it down. Yeah. So let's get started. So I'll be using my Adobe XD here just as a reference to design the components. So I'll first create a new file. And then I'll create a JavaScript file as well, and the CSS file. And then I'll just set up my HTML page. And then in here, what I need, I'll first build out this container here. So I'll just have a div and give it an ID called container. Then I'll go ahead and style that. Let me first add my styling here. Okay, there we go. And then for my container, I'll just copy and paste the styling from there. So I'll give it a width of 656 pixels. And I'll get my height here as well. And then background color, just copy everything. Let's see here. Then border 1 pixel, solid, same color. Then let me just run this in live server. So Control Shift P, then live server. Okay, there we go. So just need to change the opacity here. So I'll just change the inner opacity instead of the border as well. So I'll just come to my background color and switch to RGBA. Then just reduce this, so I think it was at 22%. There we go. And I can just copy that and then maybe add a border radius as well. Let's make it 10 pixels. And then we'll just center everything. So I'll add a body. I'll add some styling to my body, sorry. And then next thing, let me export these shapes as images. So perhaps let me first create a folder here called images. Other assets. And then I'll go ahead and export these. And then I'll just rename these. Let's see which one is this one. So that's the triangle. Just rename it to triangle. Then that will be my square. And circle. Okay. Now I can just come down here. I'll put these in a div of its own. Call this shape container. And then I'll have my images here. Then let me give this a class of shape. Okay, so let me just fix my styling here. We had a flex direction of column. Then I can just remove this justify content. There we go. And then let me just maybe give my shapes a size. There we go. Then I'll just add a margin top to my shape container. Go and then so give this a display as well. Our shape container display flex. And justify content, maybe we'll say space between, and we'll give it a width of, should be the same width as our container here, which is 658. So maybe change this, say space evenly. There we go. Just copy that. Cool. So we have our basic layout here. The first thing I'll need to do now is make these shapes draggable. And to do that, you basically go onto your image, or our shapes in this case, just draggable, then click true. Then just do the same for the rest of the shapes. And then this should just allow my shapes to be dragged. And then as you can see, the cursor doesn't change when I drag the image. So to fix that, we'll just go into our shape. Let's maybe change this into the shape. And then cursor, we'll say move. Then now it will give us this cursor here. So when I drag it, it will give us that. So what we want to do now, let's perhaps first implement the highlight that we had here. So when I drag a shape onto my container here, it should change the color and the border color. So to do that, we'll just add a listener here called onDragOver. Okay, so and then we'll maybe call our function onDragOver as well, I guess. And then here, let's just pass in the event parameter. And then let me just link my JavaScript as well. There we go. So in my JavaScript, I'll just create a function called onDragOver. I'll use the arrow functions in this case, but you could also just use normal functions like this, and then you have your name. It should work the same. So I'll just keep the arrow functions for now. So if I console log the event, we should just get back some data that relates to this container here. So if I just right click there, bring this down, go into my console. So every time I just hover over it, as you can see, we have this event going on here saying is trusted true, so on and so on. So what I want to do now is I want to get the container here. So to do that, I'll just create a variable called element, and then this will be event dot target, and then I'll just console log element, and this basically will be this container here. So as you can see, every time I hover, I just get back the container element. So I can remove this console.log. So what I want to do is on my element, on my container element, I want to add styling. So every time someone hovers over it, I want to add a class to it that I can style later on. So I'll just say element.classList .add, and then we'll just say hovered. Maybe hovered over, something like that. So if I just go to my elements, so we'll just focus on this container element here. So every time I hover over it, it should add the class hovered over onto it. So if I hover my shape here, as you can see, it adds the hovered over class there. But then we want this class only to be added when we hover a shape over the element. So right here we have on drag over. We need another event called on drag leave, which is when the element leaves our container. We want to remove the class here. So just create another function called on drag leave. And then in this case, we'll just, instead of add, we'll call remove. And then in our HTML, we'll just, let's copy this. And then it will be on drag leave. There we go. Let's just change that as well. Say on drag leave. Let me just check the casing. So it's on drag leave. Cool. So now if we, let's just perhaps reload this. So now every time I hover a shape over, we have the class added, hovered over. If I remove it, the class is removed. And then this should also apply for all the other shapes that I hover over. So if I hover my square there, it should do the same with the triangle. So now when this is hovered over, we need to apply the styling to this class here, which is hovered over. So I'll just copy this. And then I'll just create the styling for that. So background color, we can take this. Okay, let's just make this important because it's being overridden by this container here. So this is the ID over our container. So let's see if that works. Okay, there we go. And then, okay. So as you can see, every time we hover over, the background color changes. So let me just get a more transparent version of the color. So I'll just paste it in there and then go to RGBA and then get 22. Maybe a little more. Okay, let's say 40. Then we'll just copy that. Paste it there. First, let me add a border. One pixel, solid. And then that will be FF5. Okay, and then I'll just remove this and add the RGBA. So now, okay, there we go. I think the border, I also need to just add the important. Cool. Yeah, there we go. So now every time we hover over, the color changes. And then, yeah. So now the next thing we need to do is, so as you can see here, whenever I move a shape and bring it into the container here, the icon, or the cursor rather, it changes from this cursor, this move cursor that we've set, to the normal cursor. And the reason for that is by default, the elements don't allow us to drag anything over them. So to fix that, what I'll need to do is go here and say on drag over rather, let me go there and then just click event dot prevent default. Okay, so as you can see now, we have a different cursor that pops up, which is that one there. So yeah, that fixes that. And then as you can see, if I just leave an item there, meaning I don't hover out, the color remains. So what we need to do now is head back over to our HTML, and then I'll need to come here and add an on drag end. So this event will be fired when we finish dragging the item. So I'll just say drop shape, right? Then I'll add an event. So I want to get this specific shape, so I'll do the same thing that I did with the on drag over, pass the event, and from the event I'll get the actual shape or image. So I'll just add this to image here. And I'll just copy that, come to my JavaScript, and just create my function again using the arrow functions. And then here I'll get my element. So if I just console log this, you should see the element actually being printed out when I finish dropping or dragging the shape. So if I drag, drop, then we have the image there. So now what I want to do is append the element within this container here once I'm done dragging. So first let me get the element that I want the shape to be placed on, which is this element here, and we assigned that an ID called container earlier on. So I'll call document.getElement by ID, and then that'll be container. Then we'll just say container dot append child, and we'll say element. Or perhaps let's change this to shape. And change shape to element as well. Where do we have element again? Oh, there. Okay, circle. Then my circle moves on there. There we go. So we just need to change the styling once more. To do that, just copy this. Then in this case, it will just be container. Oh, it's actually adding the class, sorry. Let me just remove instead. So just heading back here, we drag, we leave, then the styling moves back. Then we can drag this again, and then it adds that to our container. Then we can do the same for the triangle. So as you can see, everything is just being placed like in the top corner here. We can just add some styling to our container so that everything is kind of centered in the middle. And that's just the flex box. So we'll just add align items, center, just container, add display, flex, justify content, center, align items, center. Then justify content, maybe let's say space evenly. There we go. And we can just copy this and paste it in our styling. And there we go. And that's pretty much it with the first part. I mean, it's pretty basic. So now if I drag all of these, as you can see, it's functioning as presented in the beginning. And then I can do the same with the square and the triangle. And that's all there is to it. Now for the second part of this tutorial, we'll be building out this list here, this drag and drop item. So let's first edit the files that we've just set up. So I'll just remove some styling and some elements from my HTML. Let me just run this. So I'll remove these shapes. You can just get rid of that. Then we'll remove all this on drag. Then also remove all the functions that we have in our JavaScript file. So then here I have div. And let me just remove that as well. So we should just have this now. So I'll give this an ID. So I'll give each element, each list element an ID and a class as well. So the ID will be, let's give it the name of the shape. So it will be circle. And then class will be shape. Just have the name there, circle. Then next is square. Then triangle. And then I'll add one more. I'll call this octagon. Cool. So we have the names there. Let me just apply some styling to this now. So I'll just select each shape. And then for my container, I'll just add a flex direction, make it column. And I'll just add a font to my body. And then for the shape, let me apply some styling to the shape class. So I'll give it a width of, let's say 90%. Then a height of 20 pixels. Maybe that's cool. Then padding, 10 pixels. Let's give it a background color of white. Border radius, 5 pixels. Perhaps let's make it a bit bigger. Then we'll add a flex box as well. I keep getting confused between align items and justify content, so that's what I'm looking for. So I'll just copy all of that. I'll also increase the height of my container to maybe, let's say 300. Or let me make it 400 pixels. And then I'll add more shapes in it. So let me first add the styling for my shape and then increase that, let's say 350. See how that looks. I guess we'll keep 400. Cool. And then I'll just add one more shape. Rectangle. There we go. So first thing, just like in the first part of the video, we'll need to add a draggable. Make that true. And then the first thing I'll need to do is add an on drag start in this case. So this will fire when we start dragging the actual item. So here, let's say start drag. Then we'll pass along the event as well. And what I want to do here, I'm going to create a variable. So I'm going to create a variable for two elements, Firstly is the element that you're moving. Let's say let element to move, and that will be this element here, which is the start drag. Just change the naming there. So this element to move will be the element that will be dragging. So when we drag an element, when we drag an element, I just want to get the actual element that is being dragged. And then when we hover over a certain element, I also want to get the element that's being hovered over, so that when we let go, we'll replace that element with the one that we've been dragging. So here, I'll just get the element. So I'll say let element equals to event.target. Then element to move will be equal to that element there. So I can just console log element to move then. So when I start dragging an element, let's see, console.log, sorry. So there we go. So when I start dragging any element here or any list item, it should console log the element that I'm actually dragging. So let me just copy this and add it to all the other elements here. So now if I drag square, then I get square being console log there. Same triangle, octagon, and rectangle. So that's the first part. And I can remove this. And then next, I'll also need to get the element that I want to replace. So I'll call element to replace. To get this element that I want to replace, I'll need to add an on drag enter, meaning, so if I drag an element into another element here like this, like fully into that element, then I should get that element as well, which will be the element that I want to replace. So I'll just go on drag enter. Then I'll call let's just say get element to replace. Then we'll have our event. And then here we'll just get the element. And then we'll say element to replace. So the difference between the on drag enter versus on drag over, which we use in the first part of the video, is that on drag enter only fires when we drag the whole element within or over the what you call the element here. So if we drag this circle all over this square, that's when that fires. Whereas on drag over only fires when we have like the square hovered over. And then we'll say element to replace equal element. Then I can also just console log that element to replace. Okay, and then let me copy that. Event. There we go. So let's just go ahead and test that. So now when I hover my circle over the square, as you can see, the square is being console logged. And then if I take my triangle and I hover it over the square, same thing happens. So the difference between as you can see, in the previous video, we used the on drag over for our main container. Here we're using the on drag enter. And the difference is with the on drag enter, it only fires when I drag over like the entire or most of the element here, most of the square element. And let me just add this to my circle as well. There we go. And then we'll just need to add an on drag over as well, just to at the prevent default. So I'll do that as well. Then I'll just copy this and add it to each element here. So let me just put it there. And I'll share the code for this on GitHub. I'll add it in the description as well. So I'll just get my element. And then, oh, sorry, the only thing we need here is a prevent default. And that's all we need there. And lastly, we'll need to add one more event called the onDrop, which will be fired when we actually let go of our element when we choose to drop it off on top of another element. So I'll just add onDrop here. Then we'll just call it drop element. Then for now, we'll just leave it. We won't pass our event. And then I'll call const drop element. So it'll just be an empty function for now. So what I need to do now is replace or swap these two around. And to do that, I'll first need to get my container element. So we'll say container document.get element by ID container, and then I'll need to then replace or swap the elements around. So I'll call container dot insert before. So first I need to get the element that I want to replace, which is element to replace, and then that will replace that element with the element I want to move, in this case, which is my element to move. And then if I take my circle, for example, and move it down to my square, I keep forgetting to add all of this to each element. Just add that. Okay, let's give that another go. So if I take my square and bring it down to a circle, as you can see, the square goes up. And then if I try triangle, and then if I bring down the triangle, that goes up as well. Then there we go. So as you have noticed, this only works like if I'm bringing down an element. So if I'm moving triangle down to octagon, then octagon goes up there. But if I try to move triangle back up, then nothing changes. And that's because the element that we, if we go back to our JavaScript here, the element that we're replacing is going above. So the element to move in this case, which is like triangle, it will come before the element that's being hovered over. So if I hover over octagon, the triangle will actually come before the octagon. So in the same way, if I bring down triangle and I hover over circle, it will bring the triangle before the circle, meaning below that. So as you can see, it brings it down there. So what I need to get now is to detect whether the user is actually moving up or down. So to do that, I'll first create another variable called start y position. And then we'll actually add this when we start our drag. So when we start our drag here, we'll get the y position. So that will basically be, so we're already passing our element. We can get the actual start position from the element. So we'll just say start y position equals element. It'll be event rather dot client y. So this was when we get our y position at the when we start dragging. So if I just console log this to show you what the result is. So if I start dragging down the circle, I should get the Y position. In this case, it's 51. And then same here, 125, and so on. And then lastly, I need to get the end position. So I'll just say end Y position, and this will be on our drop function here. So I'll just say end Y position equals to, now in this case I need to pass my event. So event, and then I'll say event dot client Y. And then now I just need to run a comparison to determine whether the user is going up or down. So if the user is going down, we can keep the same line. If not, then we'll have to switch the two elements around. So I'll just add an if statement. I'll say if, then I'll end off with an else statement. So if end Y position is greater than my start Y position, meaning I'm moving down. So if I'm moving my circle down, for example, then I want the circle to go below the element that I'm hovering over. So in that case, we'll stick with this line here. So if I move my circle down, it does the replacement correctly, and then I'll just need to copy that and then put it in the else statement, meaning if it's going up, I'll need to just swap these two around. There we go. So now if I take my circle and move it back up, then it should bring up the circle there. And then triangle go up, and then I can bring it down as well. I can put it on the square, I can bring it down. So there we go. So the whole drag and drop functionality is working pretty much fine. What's remaining now is just to add the styling. And then to do that, I'll just maybe export this icon here. So I'll just say drag menu. Then I'll just add this to my divs here, my shape divs. So I'll put all my text in the span element. There we go. And then lastly, just the image, source, say assets, and drag menu. Then I just need to add, okay, the size is fine, I guess. Justify content, space between, and that's it. And that's all there is to it. So now I can simply drag up. Oh, sorry, I think we left out the styling. So when I hover over a shape, I should change the styling. So to do that, we'll just go back into our where is this? On drag over. Is it on drag over? I think it's on drag enter. Oh, let's put it on the on drag over. So what we should do here, change the styling of the element, or rather add a class to the element. So we'll just say, let's first get the element. event or target. That will give us the element, and then we'll just call element dot class list dot add, and then I think we can just use the same name as previously, hovered over, and then we'll just remove it on okay, we'll just need to add another function, but let's first style the on drag over. And the only styling here, I think it will just be an opacity. We'll just reduce the opacity to, let's say, 0.7. Okay, so it changes the color of the element that we hovered over. Let's make it 0.5 just to make it more visible. Okay, there we go. So now as you can see, it doesn't change back when we actually leave. So we'll just need to add on drag leave to each element here. On drag leave. Let's say remove opacity. Just pass event as well. Then we'll just copy all of that and then replace the add with remove. So now I can drag, and then okay, it's still not working. Did I skip something? Oh. Just the square. Okay, so it should work fine now. So if I hover over an element, it should reduce the opacity. The moment I leave it, it should change the next element. So there we go. So we'll just need to add the same function to the drop element. So we can just do that. I think this should be it. Yeah, that's it. So now if I drag over the octagon, everything should change. Then I can do the same rectangle over triangle and so on. So this is pretty much it with drag and drops. I'll share the code on GitHub. Be sure to take a look at it. If you have any questions, you can drop a comment below. That's it for now, guys. Cheers.